Hi Blender fans and welcome once again to Blender DC. In today's tutorial we're going to actually be making the rose. I use this technique to actually make the rose logo that we've just seen in the first 28 seconds. So let's begin. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to actually make this rose which I did for Dawn. So let's just delete this cube and I'll show you how this was done. We're going to actually use some quick keys. G will move our cube around, Control Z will undo. We're also going to use tab to take us in and out of edit mode because we're going to be using that mode. We're also going to be using, in today's tutorial, we're going to be using proportional editing, which is found under this button here, and we've got point select, line select and face select, which do what they say. Select a point, selects a line and selects a face. Will allow you to manipulate your object. Right. So let's begin our tutorial. Right. X will delete our cube, and first of all we're going to actually add our item that we're going to actually change into our petal. So what we'll do is we're just going to add in a mesh, and the mesh we're going to add in is a circle. So we're going to add in a simple circle. The X line there is red from left to right. The Y is green from front to back. And of course we've got another invisible line, which is the Z, which goes from top to bottom straight through the center of this point, which is called the origin. So selecting the circle, we're just going to go into edit mode by pressing the tab key like that, and we're going to actually use a thing called grid fill. So I've gone into edit mode, and what we're going to do, on your top of your keyboard you should have your F keys, and you've got one there which is called F3, which will fetch up this menu. And what you need to do is go into the search tab up here and simply spell grid, and what we're looking for is a thing called grid fill. So press grid fill and you'll see this little menu down here at the bottom. We're going to just open this up and press the 7 key just to look from the top, and this is what we're going to actually use to make our rose petal shape. It's entirely up to you what shape you make your rose petal, or whatever plant or flower you're actually creating. I've used this technique to actually make daffodils and all sorts of things, but that's probably another tutorial. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to actually see there we've got span and we've got offset. I'm going to change the actual span to 10. And the offset I'm just going to take down in the minus until I get the lines running from left to right across the X. I mean, this might vary on your machine depending how your machine is set up, but basically I've got this from left to right. So we've basically got our round shape, and this is where proportional editing actually comes in. So we're going to actually hit the proportional editing button, make sure you're on point select, and we'll select this point here. What we're going to do is move this point by pressing the G key, then the X key, and what you can do is just move this up or down like so. If you move your mouse button, this will actually change your circle of influence, and I think that's about right for me for that. And if we actually select this other point, and we'll just G and X again, and I wanted to make the classic petal shape, so I'm going to shrink the influence right down so I get that kind of shape. So I've got my first petal shape. Now we're going to want our petals to actually spin round this central point just there, so what we're going to do is just G and X to move them to the right like so. If we look from the top by pressing the 7 key, and I'll just zoom in slightly just so we can see that we're actually setting that point right to the center of the 3D cursor, which is marked by this red and white ring. So what we're going to do now is actually go into object, and we're going to set the origin of our object to the 3D cursor, which of course is the center of that red and white ring. So set origin to 3D cursor like that. What that does is, I'll just Control Z just to actually show you. You see you've got an orange dot there, that it would rotate around that orange dot there, but because we're going to object set origin to 3D cursor, as you can see the orange dot is vanished there, and the orange dot, although it's nearly invisible, is directly on the point in the center there. So if we actually go to our petal and say we were to rotate this in the Z direction, as you can see it's now rotating like so. Control Z just to undo, because we don't want to do that just yet. What we're going to do is press the 7 key to look from the top, and I'm just going to Shift and D, which will duplicate our petal, and then I'm going to rotate by pressing the R, then the Z by 72. So let me shrink this down because it's getting a bit annoying. The reason I've done that is because I'm going to have 5 different petals, and 360 divided by 5 is 72, I believe. Well, something like that, I know. So get the petal, Shift and D just to duplicate again, left mouse button to fix, rotate Z 7 2, and Shift and D, press the enter key to fix it, or your left mouse button and rotate Z 7 2, and Shift and D, rotate in the Z direction by 72. So there we have it. We've got my petals of my rose. As you can see, we've got a lot of distortion there, and this next part will actually get rid of our distortion, and what we're going to use is a thing called merge by distance. But first of all, we need to actually join all our petals together. So select the first petal, then the second petal by holding the Shift button down, and just go around all your petals, then right click and just join them all together. If we now go into edit mode, what we've got here, we've got points over points. I mean, at the bottom there's at least 5 points over that one point in the center, which we don't want. So we're going to actually get rid of all these by pressing the A key to select all. We went into tab mode by pressing the tab key, obviously, and then we're just going to press A to select all, and we're going to use a thing called merge by distances. Now this means that anything that is close to us will actually be merged together by a distance, and we're going to set the distance in just a second. So right click, and as you can see you've got a big long list up here, but you've got this thing here called merge by distances, and select merge by distance, and that fetches up this little menu down here. And if we open it up, we can actually just increase this amount, and at the bottom of the screen you see it's removed 4 vertices. That's the 4 points in the center, or the 4 extra points. And if we just keep increasing this, you'll see it start to move things or merge things. It's merged 9 there, then 24. As you can see, it's eating away at our rows, but this will give it an organic look because it changes. That's got a chunk, that's got 2 chunks out of it. Now that's got 1 chunk, that's got 1 chunk, that's got 2 chunks. So it just, what you do is just keep increasing merge by distances until you get the desired look. As you can see, I think I've gone too far there, so I'm just going to step it back twice. 1, 2, and that's going to be my petal shape. So press the tab key, we'll fix this. This means that once you press that tab key, you can no longer alter the merge by distances. So once you do that, it's fixed. Right. So we've measured them by distances. What I'm going to do now is actually select part of my points in the center here, and I'm going to actually set a shape key. The reason I would do this is to actually anchor parts of our petals. So press the tab key, make sure I'm in edit mode, and as you can see we've got a point there, point there, point there, point there. So what I'm going to do is actually hold my left mouse button down and I'm going to select these points in the center like that. In fact, I'm going to catch that one as well up there. So I've selected all my points in the center, and what I'm going to do is hit this little upside down triangle and go on vertex groups, add a group. I'm just going to call this anchor, because I'm using it as an anchor, and then make sure you assign those points. This will allow us to actually make these not move in our simulation shortly. So I'm pressing out of edit mode by pressing the tab key, and what I'm going to do now is actually go into a thing called physics properties, and we're going to add a cloth. If we add a cloth, oops, as you can see the cloth is affected by gravity and it just falls. So we've added our cloth, and what we're going to do is add our shape key. So go down here until you find this menu that says shape, and we're going to actually select our anchor group, and then if we press the space bar again, as you can see it actually anchors round our point just there. I'm just going to come out of edit mode and I'm just going to shade smooth this just like that. As you can see, we've now got our funny looking petals. So we've created our petals, but of course they're falling and they're going in the wrong direction. And of course, if you look at it, they're actually going through themselves. So, you know, that petal is traveling through that petal. Just show you again. As you can see, in the real world, things would not be able to go through each other. So we're going to actually look at a thing called collision in the cloth modifier, and it should be here somewhere. Just let me shrink that down because we're not using that. We've got the collision modifier, and we're going to go on self collision, which will stop them going through themselves. So press the space bar, and if we look again, it should be that the cloth will not go through itself. Can look a bit weird, but there you have it. So we've got our petals, but they're not going in the right direction, and that's where gravity comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually turn the world upside down, and gravity is going to go in the upwards direction rather than the downwards direction in our cloth modifier. So I'm just going to shrink all these down just to actually show you. So we've got our cloth, we go right down to the bottom. You've got a thing called field weights, and if you go in field weights and if you turn this into a negative figure, -1, and we press space bar again, as you can see it now goes up instead of down. So we've now created a petal shape like that. Now let's just add a bit of colour just to actually make this look a bit more rose-like. Press new, and I'm just going to change it into a reddy colour like that. So we've got our petals. Let's make it a white rose actually, just a tinge of yellow. Right, so we've made our rose, and as you can see it's not very rose shaped because a rose is, it seems to go around a bulb. So what we're going to do is add in a collision object, and the object we're going to add in is a sphere. So add mesh and a sphere like that. I'm just going to G and Z just to move it up slightly, scale it down slightly, shade smooth it by hitting the right button, and we're going to add the modifier, the physics modifier, into this. I'm going to make it a collision. So what will happen is these petals will wrap round the sphere because we've made that into a collision object. So the smaller the sphere, the more they will wrap around it, the bigger it is, it'll affect the actual way the actual petals work. And if we were to hide this, as you can see, it does that. So it's wrapping around the sphere. Alt and H will make the sphere reappear. G and C, you know, depending on where the sphere is, depends what your petals actually do. And you can hide the actual sphere in the viewport and in the render just by clicking these two things here. So we've got our first petal. I'm just going to press the spacebar now just to stop our animation. Shift and left click will take us down to the front, and what I'm going to do is actually duplicate these petals. So Shift and D and G and Z just to move them slightly down, and what I'm going to do is rotate in the Z by 20 degrees, and I'm going to Shift and D, G and Z just to move it slightly down, and rotate in the Z by 20 degrees. I'm just going to do it one more time. Shift and D, rotate in the Z by 20, and G and Z just to move it slightly down. So I've now got 4 petals stacked on top of each other, and if we run our animation, as you can see, one set of petals will go through the other set of petals. So all we need to do now is just join them all together just to get our rose effect. So Shift and left click takes us to the front of the animation. Select the first petal, hold the Shift button down, select the second, select the third, and select the fourth, and we're just going to join these all together. So if we actually press the space bar, because they're now all one object, let's just have a look, they should not go through each other like so. And all we need to do now is actually make our sphere reappear, scale it down, stop it there, and we've got something that looks remarkably like a rose. And just for good effect, I'm just going to take it to the front of the animation. I'm just going to Shift and D the whole lot, G and Z just to move it down, and what I'm going to do is actually change the gravity on the ones I've just created by going in the physics properties. Where is it? Physics properties, somewhere around here, and go right down to the bottom. As you can see, the gravity on that one is -1, so if I change this gravity on the other set of petals to -0.5, so half the gravity, what will happen is one will move faster than the other, and we get the height, and we get our classic rose shape like so. So we've made our classic rose shape. All we need to do is add a modifier, and we're just going to add a bit of thickness to these. So Solidify, I'm just going to add a bit of thickness to my petals, add a modifier, Solidify, where are we? Solidify, just add a bit of thickness to my petals, take it back to the front, let the animation run again, and there you have it. We've got ourselves a white rose, and if you change the colour you can make it into a red rose. And all you need to do now is add a stem, add a mesh, add a cylinder, scale it down, scale it up, scale it down, scale it up, scale S and Z, and I'm just going to add a bit of model into it. So I'll go on line select, Control and R, we'll put a loop cut in. I'm going to put a couple of loop cuts in because I'm going to change the shapes of parts of it. Control R, put some loop cuts in there. Because we've still got proportional editing enabled, what we can do is we can actually hold the Alt key down, select that loop there by selecting the line if I can, and scale this up, and you can get that classic bulb shape that you tend to get on the rose just by actually manipulating it slightly like that. Shade smooth, maybe add a subdivision modifier just to subdivide surface, just to get that classic shape. Right, I don't want that to be a sharp point on the bottom, so go into tab mode, edit mode, Control and R, put a loop cut, and G and Z just to move it down. And what I'm going to do is actually alter the shape of this slightly, so G and Z, move it down, move it to about where I want it in my rose, select a point there, G and X, just to see influence, Control Z, I'm just going to do that again. I'm going to select the whole ring by pressing the Alt key down, and G and X, we can just make our rose stem just a bit more organic just by giving it a bit of shape, add a colour, new, green, shade smooth. I mean, for the one that I did for Dawn's logo, I actually added a texture. If you actually follow the fish tutorial, which should appear somewhere up here, in a little box or something, it shows you how you can actually apply different textures, and all we need to do now is make a simple leaf. So add in a mesh. I'm just going to make myself a simple leaf, G and X, and same with the leaf. I got the actual texture from Pixabay in Dawn's so just quickly make a leaf shape, and I'm just going to scale in the white, so shrink the influence down. Look from the top, I'm just going to actually just change it by hand, by point to point, because it can look a bit more. GG will actually make it move, you just make it look a bit more organic, but you get the idea. I'm just making a simple leaf shape, and you could just add the texture as covered in the fish tutorial. Well, quite a few other tutorials I've done, but the fish tutorial shows you how to attach a texture from view, which is very handy if you want to, say, make a more organic looking leaf. GX, just to move it out and make it that kind of shape, and E and X just to make that kind of shape. I'm just going to scale in the Y. I'm just making a simple leaf shape, as you can see. G and Z just to move it down, just get a bit of a curve. But very quickly you can actually start making G, Z, object, set origin, 3D cursor, G and X, rotating the Z, and G just to move it into place. Add the colour green, and that's it. Voila, we've quickly made ourselves a rose. And if you want to actually fix the animation, because you don't want animation data can cause a lot of problems when making a big scene and crashing and things like that, what you can do is you can simply fix all the actual animations. So okay, so you like where the rose is actually, say, I think that's where I want to actually keep my rose, so I'm just going to just apply all modifiers to this. So what you do is select the rose, and you've got the actual modifier, which is the spanner or wrench, and you can just apply the modifiers like so, and same on the other petals. Apply and apply, and Just applying all the modifiers to these. I'm just going to add another modifier just to make this a bit more organic. So subdivide surface, just to add modifiers, subdivide surface, so that makes it a little bit more organic, and just apply those. So join these all together now, join, and that, and join. So we've now made our very own rose, but Dawn wanted a animating logo, so I actually left the animation on, just like you saw in the beginning of the first 28 seconds of this video. So that's what I did. So there you go. I hope you enjoy making this rose, and I'll maybe do some other tutorials just making different flowers and things. And the other thing that you can actually do is you can add that gravity effect to the leaves here, so you could make them curl up if you wanted to, or if you wanted something to look like it was dying or something like that, you can make something crinkle up and look like it's actually getting a drought or something. There's a lot of effects you can actually do by using the gravity, because you can actually attach different gravities to all different items. You could have some things falling, some things rising. It's a really useful tool. Here's the actual gravity field in the cloth modifier. Thank you for joining me on Blender TC, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, subscribe and hit the like button. Bye for now.